Welcome to the J.W. Jupiter Readers Theater. I am pleased to bring you a reading of a lesser-known and underrated poem by the British World War II poet Keith Douglas. The poem is titled John Anderson. After the reading, I hope you will stay for a short discussion of the poem's standout element. Keith Douglas' most anthologized and relatively well-known poems were written during his time as a tank officer as he fought through the deserts and cities of North Africa in World War II. This poem, John Anderson, was written earlier, during Douglas's studies at Oxford. There he considered the legacy of World War I, alongside anticipating his future involvement in then-brewing World War II. This poem is about a genteel scholar-soldier named John Anderson, a man who represents the classically educated British aristocracy. He is therefore a man who believes that his own effort, sacrifice, and death during an infantry charge in World War I will be meaningful, all in line with the heroic warrior tradition connected back to Homer's Iliad. Yet he discovers at the moment of his death that this is not the case. But to not get any more out in front of the pleasure and presence of the work of art itself. John Anderson by Keith Douglas. John Anderson, a scholarly gentleman, advancing with his company in the attack, received some bullets through him as he ran. So his creative brain whirled, and he fell back in the bloody dust. It was a fine day there, and warm. Blood turned his tunic black, while past his desperate final stare the other simple soldiers run and leave the hero unaware. Apt epitaph or pun he could not hit upon to grace a scholar's death. He only eyed the sun. But I think the last moment of his gaze beheld the father of gods and men, Zeus, leaning from heaven as he dies, whom in his swoon he hears again summon Apollo in the Homeric tongue. Descend, Phoebus, and cleanse the stain of dark blood from the body of John Anderson. Give him to death and sleep, who'll bear him as they can out of the range of darts, to the broad vale of Lycia. There lay him in a deep solemn content on some bright dale. And the brothers sleep in death. Lift up John Anderson at his last breath. John Anderson should stand alongside Douglas' more recognized poems due to the astonishing turn of tone that separates the poem's two halves, what amounts to a complete tonal about-face that begins with the "but I think" that opens the second part. The first half of the poem derides John Anderson at the point of his demise. The use of euphemism and sardonic description to mock John Anderson is pronounced. For example, John Anderson receives some bullets through him instead of was shot. Then the poem focuses on second-order effects and observations, such as the fine weather of the day and on blood ruining his tunic, rather than the more immediate concern that John Anderson himself is bleeding out. At the close of the first half, John Anderson dies pathetically, attempting and failing to summon a noble thought that can eulogize his death in keeping with the literary tradition of the heroic. As he dies, he only eyes a demythologized post-World War I sun. This is a sun that sheds a harsh, clinical light on the proceedings of war, and in its glare that light reveals suffering, death, and meaninglessness, not the nobility and honor that John Anderson and the British aristocracy he represents believed in. With hindsight after World War I, the speaker at this point seems to thrill in lording a new and powerful insight into the truth of war over and against John Anderson, especially John Anderson's earnest commitment to his own death to what have been revealed to be failed and foolish values. Then, in the second half, the speaker swoops in with that, "but I think," and flips the script on the dismissive mockery of the poem's first half. Rather than a harsh sun that reveals meaninglessness at the final moment of John Anderson's life, the speaker imagines that at Zeus's command, the Greek sun god, Phoebus Apollo, descends. The command of Zeus in the poem is a rough translation taken from a key moment in the Iliad, where Zeus orders Apollo to rescue the body of Sarpedon, the freshly slain Trojan prince and Zeus's own mortal son, from mutilation by his Greek enemies. Sleep and death are then to return the body to Sarpedon's homeland Lycia for proper burial. The second half of the poem has a tone of dignified elegy and seemingly rebuts the first part of the poem. It seems to firmly reconnect John Anderson to the classical understanding of war by substituting him for the character of Sarpedon in this miniature Iliad reenactment. Yet this is not a simple repudiation of the mockery of the poem's first half. It is not a simple reassertion of Homeric and aristocratic values of warfare. The speaker in the second half remains the same speaker from the first half, the one who stated that John Anderson does die ridiculously and emptily, searching for a pun he doesn't find, that he does die only eyeing the sun as such and not Apollo as sun god. John Anderson does not see Apollo, except insofar as the speaker reimagines the event in a merciful alternate history and a fiction of the events of the first half of the poem. Remember, he opens the second half with, "but I think," rather than a statement of what is, as he does in the sarcastic first half. The elegiac tone in the second half, taken in context alongside the first, becomes a wistful elegy for the Iliad itself, for its ability to speak to us at all about our own experiences in war. And there can be no return to the beauty and comfort found in the texts that the soldier scholar John Anderson and his class cherished and believed in before World War I. We must now go forward. But where to? Forward to where? Attempting to answer this question preoccupied Keith Douglas in many of his later poems and other writings, until his death during the invasion of Normandy. In particular, his celebrated poem titled Aristocrats readdresses the concerns of John Anderson, but from the perspective of a well-seasoned soldier rather than a university student. Yet in John Anderson, the freshness of the sense of loss for the traditional, the heroic, what some may call the naive understanding of war, is mixed to a feeling of wistful acceptance by these two opposed tones, mockery suddenly giving way to dignified elegy, sheer juxtaposed. Thank you for visiting the J.W. Jupiter Readers Theater. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed what you heard, and I'll see you soon on a new reading adventure.